My name is Colonel Sarah Jennings, United States Air Force. I spend most of my days in a command center, surrounded by screens and silence, making decisions that ripple across the globe. But the moment I want to tell you about didn't happen in a war room. It happened in an auditorium, packed with generals, colonels, and decorated soldiers, the kind of place my father used to dream about. He sat in the front row that day, chest out, smiling like he'd finally arrived somewhere important. He thought he knew what was coming. He thought he was there to watch his former protege be honored. The soldier he always held up as the standard I never met. But the general at the podium wasn't talking about Miller. He was talking about a commander, a voice in the shadows, a name whispered with reverence by the men who made it home, alive. And when he finally said that name, my father's entire world shifted in an instant. That was the day he found out who I really was. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have a word to say. Growing up with Colonel Jack Jennings as my father meant living under the weight of a legacy I was never allowed to inherit. He wasn't just a military man. He was the kind who treated every dinner table like a command post, every conversation like a debriefing. If you didn't have dirt on your boots or scars to show, your story didn't count. He told war stories like gospel, chest out, voice booming, reliving the same firefights over mashed potatoes. And when he wasn't talking about himself, he was talking about his men, especially the ones who reminded him of who he thought he used to be. Guys like Lieutenant David Miller, one of his former cadets who became an Air Force pararescue jumper, PJ, and a walking recruiting poster. My father would light up reading Miller's updates, bragging like they were personal victories. He framed a photo of Miller in uniform and placed it next to his own medals, right on the mantle for everyone to see. My college diploma sat in a box in the attic, collecting dust. He never said I disappointed him directly. He didn't have to. Every comment, every comparison, every shrug when I shared good news said it loud and clear. When I landed a top analyst role with the Air Force, he called it important in its own way. When I earned my first commendation, he said, "That's nice, honey. Keep up the paperwork." If I tried to explain what I actually did, he'd nod like he was being patient, then shift the subject back to real operations. Real meant boots on the ground. Real meant guns and sweat and yelling. What I did reading encrypted feeds, guiding ops from a dark room with no windows, was invisible to him. Sometimes he'd ask me, half joking, if I'd helped color in any maps that day, or if I had finally figured out Excel. The way he said it made me feel 12 again, like the awkward kid he never quite knew what to do with. He thought he was being playful. I stopped correcting him after a while. I remember once, after a major success that earned me a quiet nod from a 3-star general, I told my dad, hoping for something more than the usual polite smile. He asked if I'd remembered to bring the donuts to the office that day. That moment stuck with me more than the commendation ever did. He didn't mean to be cruel. I truly believe that. But he saw the world in absolutes. You were either a warrior or a support act. In his eyes, I was necessary, maybe, but never central, never heroic. And I carried that with me. Through every mission, every all-nighter, every life I helped save from behind a screen. I carried his silence, his smirks, his inability to see me. For years, I thought that if I just did enough, achieved enough, I could change his mind. Turns out, the only thing that ever worked was making him see what everyone else already knew. My world isn't loud. There are no boots stomping or voices barking orders. Just the hum of high-security servers, the steady rhythm of keystrokes, and a wall of screens glowing blue in the dark. This is the command center deep in the Nevada desert, where silence is power and hesitation costs lives. I sit behind a secure console, eyes scanning encrypted feeds, satellite imagery, drone telemetry. Every movement matters. Every anomaly could mean a threat, or a chance to bring someone home. While others see chaos, I see patterns, shadows of intent buried inside numbers. When ground teams lose contact or intel goes dark, my voice is the one they wait for. Calm, direct, clipped. No emotion. I issue vectors, abort calls, and redirections that shift the tide of missions thousands of miles away. Not a single bullet leaves the chamber unless my team sees it first. They call me Whisper 6. It started as a joke, something about how I never raise my voice, but it stuck. Now it's spoken with a kind of reverence by the operators who've survived because of a few words whispered in their earpiece. It's not a title you earn with rank, it's earned with trust. My father thinks I push spreadsheets and file reports. I've stopped correcting him, because if he needs noise to feel power, he'll never understand the quiet kind. The kind that moves pieces before anyone sees the board. The kind that never seeks credit, only results. It started with a flicker. The main feed from a recon drone cut to static mid-transmission, and within seconds, the entire visual uplink went dark. Our ground team, a pararescue unit, was already deep inside contested territory, relying on our eyes from above to guide them through a network of enemy paths. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't the usual stillness of focus. It was heavy, dense, like the air itself knew something had gone wrong. I leaned into the data, watching backup channels and thermal grids, looking for a trace. The enemy was good. They'd ghosted our surveillance, baiting our team toward a trap. There was no time to wait. I cross-checked 2 heat signatures and saw a third one spike in an unexpected quadrant. The math didn't lie. The trail they were following wasn't the target. It was a setup. My voice cut through the silence, crisp and sharp. Abort current vector. Retask drone to grid 9 Bravo. Possible decoy identified. No one questioned the call. They moved because I told them to move. 30 seconds later, a new feed blinked to life. The target was where I'd predicted. The team rerouted just in time, sidestepping an ambush that would have wiped them out. I heard the commander's voice crackle through with a tight, "Got it. On a new path. Copy your lead." When the room finally exhaled, it wasn't relief. It was respect, the kind that doesn't get spoken. General Roth walked over. Didn't say much. Just placed a hand on my shoulder and nodded once. "Good work, Whisper 6, he said. That's when I knew. They didn't just trust my judgment, they relied on it. The air in the room was thick with old stories and older egos. The VFW hall smelled like stale beer, cigar smoke, and the kind of pride that had nowhere else to go. I stood near the back, hands tucked behind me, trying not to draw attention. But with my father, that was never an option. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a cluster of veterans who hung on his every exaggerated word. His voice was booming, the kind that always seemed too loud even when he wasn't trying. At his side, naturally, was Lieutenant David Miller, the golden boy, the one who'd done everything right in my father's eyes. One of the older guys, someone who knew my dad from his command days, squinted in my direction and asked, "That your girl, Jack?" My father gave a quick glance, then that familiar scoff. "Yeah. She pushes buttons somewhere in the Air Force. Behind a desk. Typing things into a computer, I guess." A few of the men chuckled, and my father didn't stop there. He raised his glass toward Miller. "This guy. Now he's the real deal. On the ground. Taking hits. That's who you want leading men." Then he looked back at me and smiled. "No offense, sweetie, but I doubt the Taliban are losing sleep over spreadsheets." The laughter that followed didn't sting as much as the quiet look on Miller's face. He didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He just looked at me. And something about his stillness made the room feel colder. He knew, or at least suspected. And I could tell it made him uncomfortable. I didn't respond. I just held his gaze, then turned away, letting the noise of the room swell around me like static. I'd heard variations of that speech my whole life, usually in smaller circles, sometimes just the two of us. But this was different. This was public. This was deliberate. Inside, something shifted. The familiar sting of being dismissed hardened into something else. It wasn't just about me anymore. My father had just insulted, in front of a crowd, someone tied to multiple classified operations. He had no idea. But Miller did, and I did, which made it dangerous. I drove home in silence, replaying every word. I wasn't angry in the usual way, not boiling or broken, just clear, like everything had finally come into focus. This wasn't going to be fixed with another attempt to explain myself. It wasn't going to be solved at a dinner table or over a phone call. He would never understand the work I did until he saw what it meant. And now, thanks to his own words, I had the perfect reason to show him, not as his daughter, but as the commander behind the missions he didn't even know they existed. The next morning, I sat at my secure terminal with a calm I hadn't felt in years. No anger. No bitterness. Just a clear plan taking shape with every keystroke. The annual Air Force Special Operations Command, AFSOC, commendation ceremony was coming up, and I had been quietly selected to receive an award for my role in a classified operation. It was the kind of event most people never hear about. No media, no public announcements. Just warfighters honoring the kind of victories that never make headlines. I logged into the guest authorization system and entered 2 names, Colonel Jack Jennings, retired, and Lieutenant David Miller. The system asked for justification. I typed, required attendance for operational debriefing and classified citation acknowledgement. It was technically true. They had both been part of the narrative, but they didn't know that yet. I made one brief call to my general's aide, just to confirm the additions were approved. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Yes, ma'am. They'll be seated front row. That was all I needed to hear. The invitations were sent on official AFSOC letterhead, stamped with every symbol of authority my father had spent his life chasing. He called me when it arrived, his voice bright, with misplaced pride. I knew that kid would make waves, he said, assuming the honor was for Miller. I didn't correct him. This wasn't about correcting him anymore. That part of me had gone quiet. I wasn't looking for an apology or a change of heart. I just wanted him to see. To truly see. Not through my explanations or arguments, but through the eyes of the people he spent his life trying to impress. The trap was set. No confrontation. No yelling. Just protocol. Timing. And one name he never thought he'd hear in a room like that. Mine. The auditorium was cold, almost sterile, and quiet in a way that demanded respect. My father walked in like he belonged there, nodding to every officer who glanced his way. Chest puffed, eyes gleaming. Beside him, Lieutenant Miller moved more slowly, more cautiously, scanning the room with a trained awareness that didn't miss a thing. They were escorted to the front row, VIP placement reserved for individuals tied to the mission being recognized. My father practically vibrated with pride. He was convinced he was about to witness Miller's career-defining moment. I stood near the stage, hands behind my back, uniform pressed to perfection. When my father spotted me, he gave a little wave, like I were part of the staff. I didn't respond. The general approached the podium, and the room went silent in an instant. His voice was calm, precise, full of weight. Today we honor the commander of Operation Iron Lantern, whose actions prevented catastrophic loss of life in hostile territory. My father leaned forward, beaming. Miller's expression didn't change, but I saw the shift in his posture. He wasn't sure anymore. The general continued. Communications were lost. A decoy trail was laid. The team would have walked straight into a kill zone if not for the rapid redirection ordered by a single voice. Miller's jaw tightened. I saw the moment the story stopped being familiar and started being personal. His eyes flicked to me, then back to the stage, then to me again. This wasn't about him. This wasn't a generic tale. He was reliving it. And he knew exactly who had given that order. My father still hadn't noticed. He was too busy waiting for the name he expected to hear. But Miller saw it. Before a single name was spoken, he knew. He sat perfectly still, but his grip on the chair's armrest turned his knuckles white. He looked like a man who had just realized the floor beneath him wasn't solid. The general paused, letting the silence stretch until it became its own presence. Then he said it. "We honor Colonel Sarah Jennings, known to the teams she saved as Whisper 6. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Lieutenant Miller shot to his feet with military precision, back straight, eyes locked on me. The respect in his posture said everything his voice didn't. Around him, the room followed, rising in a wave of applause that drowned out every other sound. I walked forward, steady and calm, my steps echoing on the polished floor. My father didn't move. He just stared, his expression frozen somewhere between confusion and disbelief. The name he heard didn't match the daughter he thought he knew. As I climbed the steps, I finally looked at him. His eyes met mine, wide and searching, like he needed someone to explain what was happening. But there was nothing left to say. The truth had arrived, wearing my name, and the entire room had already saluted it. After the applause faded, the silence that followed felt heavier than any words. One by one, officers and commanders approached, shaking my hand, offering brief but sincere thanks. Their respect wasn't loud. It was steady, earned, and unmistakably real. I saw Miller last. He stood before me, not as my father's chosen soldier, but as a man who understood what had happened. His voice was low. "Ma'am, thank you. We never knew." Then he stepped back, and the crowd slowly thinned. My father never stood. He sat there, staring ahead, his body stiff, his hands clenched. The pride he came in with had no place in this room anymore. When our eyes met, there was no fight left in him, just silence. For once, it said everything. He gave a small, slow nod, then turned and walked out. No goodbye, no speech, just a quiet retreat, and I didn't follow. I didn't need to. For years, I had chased his approval like it was the finish line. But in that stillness, I saw the truth. I had already crossed it, with or without him. These days, my office overlooks the airstrip where our transports lift off at dawn. I lead morning briefings in a secure room with a holographic map, standing shoulder to shoulder with the kind of operators my father once worshipped. They don't care where I came from. They care what I see, how I think, and whether my decisions keep them breathing. We speak in short, coded language, but the trust is loud. It's built in the quiet nods, in the way they follow without hesitation. Not because they were told to, because they believe I see things before they go dark. This is my family now. Not blood, not an obligation, but forged in fire and quiet victories. The kind of bond that isn't spoken of outside the room. My father used to say warriors fight where the world can see them. I've learned real warriors don't need to be seen. They just need to be counted on. If you've ever been told you weren't enough or had someone overlook your worth, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment and tell us how you proved them wrong, how you stood your ground, or how you found people who truly saw you. In this space, your voice matters, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.